So it's been a couple years since the last Doom game, and now Doom the Dark Ages has finally arrived. Coming off of Doom Eternal, which I absolutely loved, I was wondering what Dark Ages could do differently that would make it separate from Eternal. Well, we got a bit of an answer with some of the interviews and trailers with the dev team, as they described this game to be slower, more grounded and tanky compared to the other titles, which were really fast and fluid. On the surface, I thought this was going to play worse because Eternal's gameplay was just that good, but to my surprise, Dark Ages gameplay works extremely well. Furthermore, after finishing this game, I think the changes in this game allow it to stand on its own compared to its predecessors. What I didn't expect was the actual impact these changes would have on the gameplay overall, as it created a fresh but familiar experience. If you've played any Doom game before, then you already know how all this works. Run around areas and kill a bunch of demons before finishing a level. Simple stuff. But as I've already mentioned, this game takes that formula and tweaks it enough to make it feel different than before. Some of these changes you might be a fan of, others not so much. However, for me, I loved all the changes except for the exclusion of one ability, which I'll get to later on. I said that the devs described this version of Doomslayer as a tank, and that is completely true. Right from the beginning, you can feel the weight of your character as he just feels heavy to move. Then once you start the fighting, the impact of your weapons, both guns and melee, hit hard, making you appear, you guessed it, as a tank. This gives the game a completely different feel. Being this sort of immovable object incentivizes the player to stand their ground and fight instead of constantly running around all over the place. Since you're playing a Doom game, you should be running all around, as standing in the same place is a sure way to get yourself killed. But with this game, the entire gameplay loop is slower than before. There's still waves of enemies that you have to kill, but how and when you do it is very methodical. Normally, you might just try and blast through everything while dashing past the small fry. For me though, I would have to actually think about what type of enemies I wanted to kill and why I wanted to kill them. Knowing what I wanted to kill first was crucial, because I knew for some of the larger enemies I'd have to stand there and fight. Staying in one place and fighting another demon is so much fun, but when doing so, you're going to get hit with projectiles from the smaller ones at the same time. This is why I said you have to pick and choose what enemies to kill first before going after the tougher ones. All of this goes back to the entire mechanic of standing your ground. By choosing to essentially duel with these demons, this feels like you're a tank on the battlefield, pulling up and attacking while refusing to be moved. This is perfectly felt within the gameplay. However, if you're a bigger fan of the fast pace that's found in 2016 and definitely Eternal, then I completely understand, because that chaotic style of gameplay never gets old. What I think elevates this different style of gameplay in Dark Ages is the shield. From the start of the game, you're given a shield that seems pretty basic at first, but when you start getting the upgrades for it, the shield becomes your best friend. You're able to do so many different things with the shield, from defending yourself, to parrying, throwing it like Captain America, and even stunning enemies. Knowing how to use the shield and when to perform certain actions with it will be the difference between life and death. The shield really is that important. I loved how the devs made it easy to parry the enemy's attacks by having their parryable attacks glow green, and then you press a button to time the parry accurately. It takes a bit of getting used to at first, but once it clicks, it clicks. So many demons have fast and long-reaching melee attacks that have to be parried in order to prevent you from taking major damage, so it's an absolute must to get this mechanic down. To take it a step further, once you parry an attack, it charges your own melee attack, so then you can hammer away at the enemy after parrying. So pretty much if you master the parry, you'll get unlimited melee attacks, which is awesome. Speaking of melee attacks, you have a couple weapons at your disposal for performing these moves. You have your fist, a flail, and a dread mace. Each of these have their own benefits, but for me I use the flail the most. The flail offered mid-range damage but had pretty good reload time, and once upgraded, it would tear through the enemy's armor, making them vulnerable to almost anything. When choosing which melee weapon you're going to use, I would say be mindful of the recharge speed of each weapon, because you're going to be spamming these a lot, and you don't want to be waiting around for these to recharge. Regardless, abusing the melee attacks is a guaranteed way for you to beat the game. It really is that easy. Regarding the other weapons, there's plenty to choose from, with some familiar ones returning from the other games. My favorite weapon you use was the Cycler, which is an alternate type of gun for the accelerator. At first, I wasn't the biggest fan of this gun, as it just seemed like another machine gun. However, once I began upgrading, this thing became extremely powerful. First off, once upgraded, if the enemy took enough shots, it would cause them to have a lightning effect which lowered their defense. So once the enemy glowed purple, I knew that I could hit them with another gun and shred their health. But this is where the combination of weapons comes in to make the gunplay extremely satisfying. What I did was shoot the enemies with the Cycler to turn them purple, then throw the shield to stun them, then charge in and melee them to death or shoot them into oblivion with a shotgun. Rinse and repeat, and this strategy worked for almost every enemy. Even in the late game stages, I would use this to take down the large demons, and they would just fold instantly. Nonetheless, what you use to take down the demons is always up to you, and that's what I loved about this game. You're never forced to take down the enemies in a certain way. It's always your choice. My second favorite gun would have to be the chain shot. This gun is pretty much a giant chain that shoots out of a gun and obliterates an enemy's armor. Once this gun is upgraded, it only takes 1 or 2 shots max to take out the armor on large demons. What makes this really good is that it can even stun the demons after removing their armor. This gun is just an all-around beast when you pair it with one of the other ones. It's a deadly combination. A bit ago I did mention taking down the enemies, and what I thought this game did a good job of was the enemy variety. Yes, after a certain point you are fighting the same enemies over and over, but that isn't until the latter stages of the game. Up until about chapter 15-ish, you're encountering a new type of demon in each chapter. These demons are all unique in design and offer a different set of challenges that will test your ability to parry. What makes these great is the strategy to defeat them isn't always clear. Let me give you an example. Partway through the game, you're going to meet these witch-looking demons. When you start combat, they're going to fly around and start shooting skulls at you while making the ground glow purple. Your first instinct may be to try to shoot them, only to find out they have a shield surrounding them. So when this happened to me, I was like, how the hell am I going to get rid of this shield? I tried shooting, hitting it with a melee weapon, nothing seemed to work. That's when I noticed that there was a second one of these witches flying around not far from where I was, but this witch didn't have a shield, so I decided to kill that one first. And once that one died, the shield disappeared on the original witch. This is when it all clicked. I realized that each time the witch spawns, a doppelganger will also spawn, with you needing to kill that one first in order to remove the shield on the original and take that one down. This isn't told to you in the game, and I'm glad it's not. Being able to figure this out on your own through trial and error is really fun, as the game incentivizes you to try different strategies and techniques to win. It's great. It's worth mentioning that the devs did a hell of a job at mixing and matching the most annoying combination of demons to throw at you during the fights. So many times I went into the fights like, okay, I got this is light work, only to be fighting 2 really annoying demons at the same time while dodging the attacks of the small fry. This makes the battles way more intense and exciting because the game actually challenges you to some degree. I played on Ultra Violence, but honestly I should have played on Nightmare because I couldn't handle it easily. Regardless, you're gonna have to lock into some portions because they throw everything imaginable at you and you just gotta rip and tear. Now, as great as this game is, it's not completely flawless. One thing I wish was still here that was excluded was the ability to dash. I'm pretty sure that in Eternal you were able to dash in different directions to avoid enemy attacks. This is almost like a dodge. By pressing a certain button you would just move in the desired direction. I get why this isn't here because the gameplay is meant to be slower, but this would have really been useful for some of the later boss fights. Even still, this didn't take away from the gameplay experience, it was just something I wish was included. Regarding the music, I was skeptical about how the soundtrack would be considering Mick Gordon was a part of this game's OST, and unfortunately, I was right to feel that way. The music isn't bad by any means, but it doesn't compare to 2016's and Eternal's. If you go back and listen to those game soundtracks, the music in those games just hit different. Those songs make you actually feel like the Doomslayer, like you could close your eyes and imagine yourself actually killing the demons. It also makes the battles way more intense and helped me lock in for those tough bosses that would appear later on in the game. So pretty much what I did was just listen to the Doom Eternal soundtrack while killing the demons because it really does change the experience that much. The gameplay is already great, but adding in the older OST takes it to insane levels. It's no knock to the guys who created this game's music because it is solid, but it just doesn't hit the same. It could have been me, but I also thought the mixing was off because the music itself was lower than it should have been. Even after I turned my music volume up, it's like the music was purposely put in the background, maybe to make us look past it. But what I do know is that to create the most immersive experience possible, just play the game while listening to Eternal's soundtrack. Thank me later. Going back to more positives about the game, I did like the change of making some of the levels more open and wider than before. I wasn't sure how I would feel about this, but once I went through it, I liked it a lot. It might seem a bit overwhelming at first, but once you take a look at the map, you'll see that it's not as big as it seems. Littered across it are the items that are used to upgrade your weapons alongside gold and extra lives as well. I think finding these is crucial to having a good time with this game. Unless you're just a complete FPS god and don't need any pick-me-ups, I always went out of my way to find as many of the upgrade materials and life sigils as I could. I never knew what demon horde was coming on my way next and what boss would be lurking within that horde, so I really wanted to be prepared. Plus, finding all of these was pretty easy to do. Some of these are well hidden, but not so much that you'll struggle finding them. What's cool about these items is that you don't have to pick them up, so just like the combat, this area of the game is optional as well. Believe it or not, this gameplay gets even better. New to this game was the ability to use giant mechs to take down colossal demons. Seeing this in the trailers, I didn't think this would be much fun, but it actually was. There isn't too many of these sections in the game, but when you go through them, they're so distinct and different from the rest of the game, it feels like a breath of fresh air. All you do is run around and melee demons, and it's about as tanky and weighted as it possibly could be. You still have the ability to dodge, but once you do that and throw enough punches, you can perform a powerful finisher that instantly shreds the demons. Do this a bunch of times while destroying the area underneath you, and you completed the level. level. I think this entire mech suit mechanic aligned perfectly with the theme that this game was going for. It worked really well, and we didn't use these too much to get bored of them, at least in my opinion. Alongside the mechs, there's sections where you ride around with your dragon and kill demons and take down demonic ships. Again, just like the mechs, I didn't think this was going to work until I actually played. Flying around at fast speeds and shooting the crap out of demons is just as fun as doing it on foot. They incorporated this into the gameplay well by only having us do it in certain sections, similar to the mechs. It's easy to pick up, and once you do, I'm sure you'll have just as much fun as I did. If you complete certain challenges on foot, in mech, or on dragons, you can earn skins for yourself, weapons, and the dragon. Just another reason to embrace these new changes and try your best to achieve everything in that specific section. Lastly, there was a focus on story for Doom the Dark Ages that wasn't there in the other two installments. Yes, those games had story, but the way it was presented in this title was really good. With completing each chapter, you're greeted with cutscenes in the beginning and end, with some being thrown in the middle here and there. Out of all three modern day Doom games, I think this story was presented in the best way. It lines up so well with how modern day stories are in games, and it fits perfectly with Doom the Dark Ages. Even with this emphasis on story, you still don't have to care about it. If you're only concerned with killing demons, skipping the cutscenes or not paying attention to the story won't have any dire consequences. But if you're someone like myself who loves story, then having these cutscenes feels like an added reward for completing each chapter. You meet a small cast of characters and go through a solid story about Doomslayer and how he gets to be the way he is by the start of Doom 2016. For a prequel, this story had a lot going on, but never overstayed its welcome. It knew when to start and when to finish, which for a Doom game is a good thing. Overall, Doom the Dark Ages is a fantastic game. The changing gameplay style was a risk, but I think it paid off. The game feels great to play, and even though you're slower and stronger, it feels just as fun as it did in Eternal. If the dodge was added back and the music was on par with Eternal's, then this game would be literally perfect. Even still, I loved it. For those reasons, I want to give this game a 9.5. I think ID Software did a great job with Doom the Dark Ages. If they do decide to do another Doom game and make the decision to combine everything about Doom Eternal with the new stuff they introduced in Dark Ages, then the next Doom could be the best Doom game in history. There's so much good in both of these games that by bringing them together you could create a perfect game. Maybe I'm crazy, but I hope that's the direction they go, because these games are just so much fun, but only time will tell. What did you think about Doom the Dark Ages? Did you like this game, or did you prefer Eternal or 2016? Let me know in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed this video, feel free to watch one of my other reviews right here.